Hi. Right, so hi. So today's video will be all about all the sewing tips regarding PU leather, or formerly known as pleather. Hey, right. I'd say hi to everybody. Hi. Right. So, first of all, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Hearts. I just need to know. Good afternoon. I just need to know if you actually can hear me. So it'd be great if you can just hit those thumbs up. That's brilliant. Okay, so today's show is all about pleather, or PU leather, faux leather. People call it faux leather. In the States they call it vinyl. So the reason why I'm doing this is because a couple of weeks ago, Lisa Lamb, if she's in there somewhere, Lisa Lamb approached me to advertise some new PU that she was getting into her shop, and it's not a seen PU out there. It's very shiny, it's very mirrory, is that a word? Mirrory. So yeah, so it's this shiny stuff and it's beautiful. It's got you can drape it ish. So yeah, so we're gonna get into what you need to know about sewing with it. So I've got 10 tips, but about 20 minutes ago I've added 11 tips. So before I was calling it my top 10 tips on sewing with PU, now I'm calling it my bonus 11 tips. So a disclaimer, this is all what I've learned over the years of using PU, but there is other people out there that's probably tried these methods and it's not worked for them, or they've found other ways. So if you have found other ways, drop it in the comments below, because that will help you or anybody else in the group that has never used PU before. Okay, so PU is generally comes in different weights. So you've got some that stretch, which is for those sewing quarter fans. Yours would have had a stretch to it. That's the reason being is that PU is well known for the industry of clothes making. Now, clothes making PU tends to have a visco backing. A visco is cotton, but it has, the way it's weaved, it has a stretch to it. So when they line the plastic part, because bearing in mind it is plastic with a fabric backing, that's all it is, but it's durable plastic. So this has got actually a bit of a stretch to it. I'm not kidding. The one Lisa Lamb is selling has got a bit of a stretch, but that's because it's how the fabric at the back has been woven and how it's been sewn onto the actual, glued onto the actual PU fabric. So the one likes of the sewing quarter had visco on the back. This one has just got a mesh cotton back, and I would say it's around about a 0.5 millimeter thick, so which means it's durable. It can go through any machine. This one can. Even I folded it up to the point where it was 8 times folded over, and I sewed that through my machine. So it's easy PU fabric that she has selected. Right, so let's get into it. Right, my first top tip is on your machine, you need to work out what is the best foot for your machine to use with PU. I personally always have a walking foot on my machine. So for those beginners who have never swapped your feet over, because there is people out there that stick with the standard foot that comes with your actual sewing machine. So I use a walking foot. Now this might look back to front on your screens. It's because of Facebook. It just keeps going. I don't understand how to flip the screen round or anything like that on the live. So this is a walking foot. A walking foot has feed dogs on the actual bottom of the actual walking foot. So when it goes through your machine, when I say feed dogs, on your machine there is where the presser foot goes down, there's like little jagged bits. Well, the jagged bits are called feed dogs, and they do this motion going through your machine, and they're basically grabbing your fabric through. With the walking foot, because it's got these little, don't know if you can see them, is that going to focus? Yep. So this has actually got those jagged bits, so it's giving that extra bit of pulling it through when it comes, so it's clamping both. The other foot that you can use is a Teflon foot. I actually don't have a Teflon foot for this machine here. Yes, it's back to front. You can get a roller foot. So some machines have a foot which has got like a roller ball on it, or a tube that rolls, that glides over it. That works a bit like a walking foot. Yeah. So yeah. Susan, how did you find the roller foot? Because some people still say they struggle with a rolling foot without knowing what a walking foot is. The other method is if you've never used PU but don't want to go out there and buy a walking foot or roller's foot or Teflon foot. And I must admit, I have tried this morning and it does work. So you got your standard foot and some washi tape. So washi tape is like a really low tack masking tape. So, but it's got like a really papery finish underneath. And what people tend to do, and Helen Rihanna has actually done this in the past too, is on the bottom of your foot. So there's my foot. You stick it on and then you cut out all the bits in the middle, cut it all out, and it glides across, and it works a bit like a Teflon foot. Now, I must admit, the washi tape did come off eventually, so I advise to go out and get if you want to go down the Teflon foot route, get a Teflon foot, or if you want to spend that bit extra and get a universal walking foot, or like my machine doesn't take a universal walking foot, it takes an integrated walking foot, so the walking foot clips in to the machine rather than this bit here resting over the screw of the needle. So it might be ideal to look into your machine, buy some PU, try it out, because that's my motto is, as soon as you get a new fabric that you've never used, cut some scrap pieces out and have a play, because you're the only one that can actually work out your machine. I can't, from here, know what machine that you've actually got, so it might be best if you actually just have a play. It took me at least a couple of weeks to pick up the courage to actually make a bag back in the days when PU used to be really horrible and not as nice as what it is now. So for people that are starting with PU like today, it is so much better technology made from what it is, what was back 10, 15 years ago. So you are on a bonus because you wouldn't have gone through all the problems that most of us older time bag makers would have found. Okay, so that's a bit about feet. So you need to move on to the type of needle that you actually use. So my rule of thumb is, because I'm bag making and most of my bags have foam, I tend to use a size 16 needle. So that's, let me find the packet. So it's size 100 by 16. This is going to be so back to front. Sorry about that. But I was playing around today with different thicknesses this morning on making sure I gave you the correct information. So also, the other needles that you can use is, if you're not using foam or a heavy stabilizer, you can go the needles lower than that. So the lower the needle, the smaller the hole, but you've got to make sure they are a strong needle. So likes of a leather needle or a jean needle. So you need to look at either a 80-16, an 80-12, an 80-12 leather needle, or a 90-14 leather needle, or a 100-16 leather needle. Or if you can't get a leather needle, you need to go down the jean needle route, and those numbers apply for the jean needles. Generally, when I first started, there wasn't many leather needles on the market, so I was always using, titanium. You can use titanium ones. Titanium ones, you can. I must admit, I have got a box of those, so I must admit I've got 116 ones in those, and I use them all the time. I've only got the Janome ones out because the box is, the packaging's a lot clearer. So yeah, you can get titanium ones. Titanium ones, I buy mine from eBay. I can find you the link, but they're not generic ones, so you have to work out what style you need for your machine, because this machine, they're like an industrial top, they don't have a flat back, so you need to find the ones that have got the flat back. What was I saying? So back in the days when I first started, there was only jean needles about, and I was always using a size 90-14 or 116. But the more my bags grew with weight and the stabilizers, I ended up going for a stronger needle, which is the size 16. So hence why I'm always saying use a size 16 needle, because it's just what I'm used to. It's what's always in my machine. The only time I advise you not to use it is when you're quilting. You use like the smaller needles. Just means it's a bigger needle with a bigger eye. So it means you can change your thread, so you can have thicker thread running through your machine. However, talking about thread, when you're bag making, it needs to be so it's got a bit of a stretch in the thread. So having a stretch in the thread means if you're using a shoulder strap and you, like me, overfill your bag, especially on a crossbody one, you will find if you use cotton thread, it will snap eventually. So you've got to take that into consideration when you're actually bag making. So I tend to use like the Gutermann Sew All thread, or moon thread. And sometimes if I'm top stitching on leather, I double up moon thread. So as you can see, I've got here two slots for threads. So if you can work out if your machine will take 2 threads, I run 2 pieces of thread going through, and then thread the needle as the 2 threads as one. So when it comes to the point where it comes out by the needle area, down here, when it comes to the point where it comes out by the needle, I know you're not meant to do this, but if you give it a little bit of lick and twist the threads together, you can thread the needle, and then basically that will give you a nice top stitch. You might have to mess around with your tension, but most of the time you don't. I've never had to mess around with any tensions. The only one time I had to do that was when I was on one of the Sew and Quarter shows, and it was a brand new machine, and it was an embroidery machine, and I just had to slightly mess around with the tension here, but you tend to not have to mess around with any of the tensions. Right, so the next thing you need to know is, I kind of already mentioned this, is buy a bit more than what you need for your project of the faux leather, or PU, or pleather, depending on what you want to call it. So, where did I get... Oh, right, okay, you're having a conversation between stuff. So, the faux leather, I always say buy a bit extra than what you actually physically need for your project, because each faux leather is different. So each faux leather, you could have a different backing. Like I've already said, it could have visco, it could have cotton weaved, it could have a mild, I've had some that have had paper backing, which is a bit weird. I've only ever used that on one bag. You can have a felt backed one. So yeah, get a piece of scrap from that particular one that you want to use on that bag and have a play on your machine. So you might want to work out on stick approach in a bit, what needle you want to go, what needle that you need to use, work out whether you're using a heavy stabilizer or a low stabilizer, which is like an interfacing or something. Then basically work backwards. So then you need to work out what needle you need to put in your faux leather into your machine. So yeah, like I say, it's trial and error. I always, whenever I buy some brand new PU, even if the colours change, because the stickiness on the top may change per colour. So it might be I bought at the moment I've got 3 different Lisa Lamb leathers here. I've ordered a few more, which you might have had the order for. But I've noticed the red is slightly more stickier than the blue and the pink that I've got. So like I say, cut a little bit extra off each piece and play. Just have a play and use the tips that I'm going to say today, but also you will know your machine best. I cannot work out what everybody's got machine wise and stuff like that. So hang on, turning the page. Right, so I did make my notes. Right, so rule of thumb is always think before you sew that line on top of your faux leather, because once you've made those holes into that faux leather or that PU, those holes are there for life. I'm not kidding, they are there for life, because as much as you try, I'm just trying to find that piece. There you go. Yeah. So earlier on, I really don't think you're going to say, oh, you might say this. There is some holes here, around about here. I've tried my hardest, there, I think you can see it there. I've tried my hardest to get them out. You will never get it out, because basically you're punching a hole into plastic. The only thing that you can do is, and I haven't done it on this, is get a hairdryer. Make sure it's actually really warm, the hairdryer. Run it over and massage it out. You won't massage it completely out, but the holes will slowly just lock up again, but the holes will still be there. So just bear in mind, the holes will always be there, but lock it up a bit. So I always, and in my drawers down here is I've got a little handhold hairdryer. Another thing you can do is, if you don't want to get a hairdryer out, is, and if you haven't got any thin stabilizer on the back, you can run the iron over the back on a medium setting. It won't, like I say, won't close it, but it will cut it down a bit. Also, another thing is always think before you sew, because once those holes are there and you sew over that sewn line, once you've unpicked it, there is going to be a perforation. And you know, when you perforate, you can tear it really easily. See, if your needle doesn't fall back into those specific holes, you are generating a perforation. So basically you could rip it. So just think on those lines. Think before you sew. So the next thing is about the holes is no pins. When you're actually pinning something together on a bag, when I say pin, I sometimes put pin stroke clip. If you clip it, you won't be generating any pinholes. So these are the clips that I use. They're Wonder Clips by Pleather, or you can get different manufacturers. So yeah, if you never use them, just get a tin. I had 100 off Amazon. They're not Clover ones. I had 100 off Amazon for about £7 in a tin. So yeah, my advice is to grab a box, or if you're like us, quilters, ex-quilters like me, you would have loads around. Always clip. If you want to pin, which I advise not to, but you've only got pins, always pin where the seam allowance is going to be. Don't pin anywhere else. So for instance, I use a 1 centimetre seam allowance or a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I would pin in that area only. But my advice is spend that £7. Those clips, I've got 200. I've had my 200 now for years and years. Hi Lisa Lamb. So basically I've had those for years, and I'm not kidding, they last a lifetime if you look after them, unless you break them or crush on them or stand on them like I tend to do, or hoover them up, because I have done that in the past. The other thing and it's my tool, the Wonder Tape or quilt tape, sorry about that, or quilter's tape, that will help you a lot when sticking it into areas for making letter boxes for your zip pockets and stuff like that, or putting your zip in and stuff. Sorry if you went down, my internet went down, sorry. Buffer tape, I really do need to get sponsored for it though. Right, so also another thing is I say is also think out when you're cutting it out as well. Right, so you need a fresh, I have 5 sets of scissors. No. 5 sets of scissors. So the scissors are that I use, or 2 rotary cutters. So I've got one for fabric, which is cotton weight, one for silk. I have another one which is for foam and fleece stabilizers. I have one for my Decaville, and then I have a Pacific pair of scissors which are very sharp for my faux leather or PU. I don't advise you to have those 5 sets of scissors. It's just me. I've been OCD over scissors for years. So yeah, always make sure you've got a sharp pair of scissors or a rotary cutter blade when you're cutting PU, because like before, you only get one cut, and that's with general sewing anyway. So also when you're cutting out, flip the faux leather over and draw before you cut. So for instance, my latest pattern, my latest pattern has templates. I would draw those templates out on the back and then cut around it. I would double check before you actually cut it out, because it isn't cheap fabric. It's a very expensive fabric, but it's a very expensive luxury that will make your bags last a lot longer. So yeah, always double check when you're cutting out. just a bit like you're double checking when you're sewing. Right, so the next thing is stitch length. Now this will all depend on you as a sewer, you as a user, and your machine. So when I say you as a sewer, you got to work out whether you're heavy-footed or not, because I'm heavy-footed, and on old machines, if I put my foot down at a fast speed, I had to keep that constant speed for the actual machine to take the actual faux leather through. Also, what you will find is that if you go at a very fast speed, and now this is where you need to work. It's like driving a car. No, I don't drive. It's your crunch of your clutch, is it? Or whatever. So you know when you got your clutch down halfway, you can change your gear. This is where you need to go slow on when you're top stitching with faux leather. Because if you go so fast, the machine cannot cope with the stitch length that you've created for that top stitch, what you want that top stitch to actually be. So I tend to, and now this is going to be back to front. You got the snail, the turtle, the snail, and the hare or the rabbit. My middle is there. When I'm sewing normally, I normally on normal fabrics, I generally have it this thing in the middle. But when I'm top stitching, I always knock this down to as far as it would go to the turtle side. It means that I've got more control. It means that the fabric is going through at a handy pace through your machine, which will give you the correct stitch length. If you use a fast speed when you're sewing with PU, the stitch lengths will be minute because the machine cannot cope, because it's sticky. So just bear that in mind. Have a play. So my general rule of thumb is stitch length is between a 3 if you've got no stabilizer on the back, a 3.5 if you've got interfacing, a 4 or a 5, a 4 to 5 if you've got a heavy foam or fusible fleece stabilizer on the back, or if you've got Decaville on the back. So I'm going to show you a few samples that I've done. Starting off with the faux leather without no stabilizer on. So as you can see, you've got the stitches here. Now I'm just making sure. The top one is a 2.5. I don't advise anybody sewing PU leather with a 2.4 or 2.5 stitch length. So the next one is a stitch length of 3. And I'm hoping you can see that. And it's still too close because this, like I say, has got a bit of a stick to it, and that's generally every PU that's on the market. Every PU has got a stick to it. Now the next one is a 3.5. So that's getting better, but it's still not brilliant. So I liked this one, which is a stitch length 4. This one here. Now, it's just the right amount for this fabric without no stabilizers on it. And the bottom one is a stitch 0.5. I did actually just twist up my knob all the way up to a stitch 0.5. Now, I thought that was way too much and it won't hold it into place. Now, right, Jeanette, you said your machine doesn't have a snail. That's down to your foot then on your actual, on your foot pedal on the floor. If you can just only slightly tap it rather than putting your foot all the way down, then that will mean that you go slower on your machine. All I'm asking you to do is to go a bit slower on asking you. Right, so back onto the stabilisers, if you the PU if you've stabilised it. So this is buckram from Tanya. I've basically ironed on some buckram, which is an interfacing, by the way. I've used buckram light on mine. That one. So back again. This one here at the top is too close. That's a 2.4. Then the one next to it is still too close, and that's a 3. The next one is a 3.5, and I actually thought it could be alright if you're sewing it right side to right side, but if you were top stitching, I wouldn't use this one. And then the bottom one, I actually only did a 3.5, and I actually thought for top stitching that one was quite well. You can take it up to a 4, but I actually found the 3.5 was ample enough on that one because my machine could cope pulling it through because I had a stronger cotton bottom. Yes, Dad. Thanks, Dad. My dad's just informed me the parcels come with all the patterns in, so thanks, Dad. Right, so the next one is fusible fleece. So once again, as you can see, look how close that line is. Because it had a bit of more bulk in it, it couldn't cope, and it's so close, it's like less than a millimetre apart each stitch. And if I didn't have a big backing on the back, I could pull this apart and rip it like perforation of a piece of paper. The next one below that one, which is this one here, that one was a 3. Still advise not doing a 3 when you're using fusible fleece. The next one is a stitch point 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. The 3.5, I still think it's quite close. It's not actually giving you a true 3.5 millimetre between each hole that it makes. The next one, however, is a 4. And I actually quite liked the 4, but I do actually think I can push it to a 4.5. But I know some machines don't go past a 4, so if you stick it at a 4, it should be alright. Moving on to foam. So I've based it all the way around, and yeah, so this one was a bit of a different story. Nice effect though, look at the quilting on that. So the top one is really close, and that's less than a millimetre apart, and that was a 2.4, which is what your machine sews at as standard. Then you had the 3, which still is too close. Then you have a 3.5, which is still way too close. The next one is a 4, which if you only do a 4, you can get away with a 4. I mean, if your machine only goes up to a 4, you can get away with a 4. But the bottom one is a 4.5, and I thought that was perfect. So like I say, you need to cut a piece of faux leather off, fuse it with all the interfaces that you need, or the stabilizers that pattern requires, and play around with your actual machine. Go at that steady speed where the machine can cope to make the right amount of holes at the right speed and give you that correct. Well, it won't always be correct to what the machine says, like I've just said, because it's got that sticky surface. But to give it a nice finish, work out your stitches, and then work out your crunch of your pedal, or your change your speed of your actual machine. Right, so the next one is excuse me, is right, you notice I've left some threads here. I would normally leave them a lot longer than this. So my next thing is, you're not meant to reverse your stitches at the start and at the end of when you're sewing faux leather, or especially when you're top stitching or joining them together. So the reason why I've left them long, I would normally leave them longer, is on the back I would pull it through, pull the top thread through and tie it off. Or if you can work out your machine very well, is, I haven't done it on any of these, if you put this under 1/4 of an inch, so 1/4 of an inch isn't sewn, and you press your reverse button, it will sew backwards first, then it will go over. The bit that is here will end up being in your actual seam anyway when you're bag making, so it won't be seen. Or you could do what they do with leather, is when I saddle stitch with leather, I have 2 needles, so I'm basically going through the holes at the same time with both needles. It's a bit like what your actual sewing machine's doing with your top thread and your bottom thread. It's interlocking in between in those gaps. So what if you leave your thread really long, you can then thread a needle and pass it back through those holes a few times, 3 or 4 times, that's all you have to do. But the holes that you've generated, you can pass it back through, and then basically cut your stitches at the back or tie them off. Then it means that it's perfectly locked the stitch at the start and at the end of each sewn line. But you don't have to, you can reverse stitch, but I only say reverse stitch in the area where the seam is going to be hidden within the bag. Right, so there used to be a theory back in the day where you could not use an iron on PU. It's not true. You can use an iron. So for instance, Lisa Lamb sent my PU in the post folded, which fine, because if you've got an iron with no steam in it, medium setting, you can iron on the back, so you can iron out all those creases. You can take it into your shower room when you're having a shower, the creases will drop out. Trust me, it does. I've done that in the past. I've taken it into the shower because I couldn't be bothered to get my my ironing board out and giving it a good press on the back. You can press it, so don't worry, because you're going to press interfacing and stabilizers on the back anyway. So yeah, and going back to last week's show where I told you about different stabilizers and stuff like that, you just need a pressing cloth to protect what you're pressing. So, and always press from the back, not from the front, obviously, because it's plastic and it will melt, and you might as well buy a brand new iron if that's the case. So the next one is, and I've already touched the subject, is yes, it can be interfaced, it can be stabilized, so don't worry, it can be. Yeah, so you just might be putting that iron in that particular area for 10 seconds or 20 seconds more than what you would do if you're when you're stabilizing cotton fabric or other types of fabric. But it can be done. So like I say, make sure you buy a tad bit extra of PU so you can actually have a play around, fuse interfacing on the back, play around on your machine. It's Lisa Lamb, shiny PU in the shower. There's a picture. Yeah. I didn't actually take yours into the shower. However, I did give it a press, and then what I tend to do is I roll it up, and then I've got a box full of rolled up PU, and then I just bend back the corner a bit so I know what colour it is of the PU. So this is the red. It's so lovely. In different lights, it goes a bit orangey, and I actually quite like that. I do actually quite like orange. I also have blue, which you've seen, and I have this pink. Obviously, because Becky has to have pink. And I don't know if you noticed, Lisa, I actually ordered some last night or the night before, some more from yourself, which is like So yeah, it's for the next pattern design that I'm working on. So the bonus step is, okay, so some of you won't have this on your machines or on your machine. So it's something called presser foot pressure. So presser foot pressure is how much the presser foot is pushing down onto your bed, which is your feed dogs. So you can, most machines are set at a number 3, which is a high pressure, which means that it's pressing down at its fullest onto the bed of your actual, onto the feed dog area. So some machines have a screw or a knob on your actual machine, and some have it digitalized, which I didn't know up until about 3 or 4 months ago when someone messaged me. She had this £5,000, I must admit it did look really nice, Brother machine, and I had to download the instructions, and I'm not kidding, there was a couple of 100 pages of English instructions, and I had to read through this booklet for her because she didn't understand why she couldn't sew with PU, the sewing quarter PU leather. And after I worked it out, because we couldn't find any knobs this area to actually release this pressure of how much it pushed down on the PU, I had to go into the settings. So if you've got a really expensive machine, jammy, but it's actually your pressure foot pressure could actually be in your actual computerized settings. So if you cannot find it, message me and I will help you. But most machines, and I'm saying most because some machines haven't, they have a knob up here or a knob on the side, and you have, some machines are very good, they have a dial here. So 3 is where my indicator is when I'm average sewing. Number 2 is generally when I'm sewing with PU, or that's when I've got a normal foot on. If I haven't got a walking foot on, when I've got my walking foot on, generally stays on a number 3. A number 1 is, you will never, if you use it on number 1, you must be sewing likes of 10 centimeters worth of fabric going through your presser foot area. Basically, when you decrease the number, it means the less it's pressing on to your fabric. So the less it will mark on top of by Lisa Lam on top of the actual fabric, or it means that the stitches will be even if you're using your turtle stitch speed, it will be an even feed through. So work out your machine. Sometimes it's a twist knob on the side here, sometimes it's this knob here which you twist, sometimes it can be on the back. It will always be in this section apart from the digitalized machines. Now, one of my testers has got a vintage Singer 201, one of the old-fashioned ones. They've actually got a little barrel that sticks up about this much. It's a bit like industrial sewing machines. They have the same. It's just that thing that sticks up is your actual pressure of how much it pushes down onto your bed. So have a look around your machine, and like I say, some machines have it in the digital section here, which is the far advanced machines. If you are struggling with your machine, honest to God, just message me. Manuals are out there, I can download them and have a read and tell you where to find your adjustments. If your machine hasn't got it, then you may need to just buy a walking foot to just help it through. But 9 times out of 10, most machines these days are built with these pressure gauges and stuff like that. So that's it. if you have any more questions, just ask below and I'll answer any questions off air. Thanks for joining me. Right, so the patterns have arrived according to my dad. So I will go down to my dad's and pick up the big box and bring it back and package up all the patterns, paper patterns that people have brought for the last few days. I also want to say thank you ever so much. I'm so overwhelmed with how many people have brought my latest pattern. I actually thought I would only sell about 4 or 5. I'm not kidding. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds have sold, and I'm not kidding. I'm so overwhelmed with how much you guys are supporting me. Okay, I'm getting tearful. So thank you ever so much. The pattern is still available as download, and I'm having to reorder some more paper patterns. I've still got quarter of the stock of the paper patterns that I've ordered, which will be fully in stock. But also, I'm having to order some more in the new year when the factory opens up again. So yeah, I will put in the comments below where you can buy the latest commuter backpack pattern. So yeah, I'm so thankful, and I cannot thank you guys enough. I didn't think I would sell that many, so thank you. So I am working on a new pattern. But it won't be until end of January when it's tested. But it's a handbag. So it's actually a handbag. So yeah, for those ladies who said, I don't carry a backpack. But yeah, it's a handbag this time. So yeah, and I'm designing that as a present for my mom. So it's a bonus in 2 ways. So, yeah. So the next live show isn't going to be next week because I want Christmas week off. However, the next live show is on the 30th and it's an evening show. It's going to run over 2 sessions because it's a tutorial. I'm going to be working alongside the author of, well, she's going to be on here. You know her. It's only Lisa Lamb. So Lisa Lamb has given me permission with the publishers to demonstrate one of her bags out of her book. Also, they've given me a prize, so I'm excited for a couple of lucky winners. So there isn't just one winner, there isn't just 2, there's possibly 3 or more, who knows. So yeah, so I will be doing that over 2 sessions, one on the 30th and one a bit later on that week. The first one will be how I've prepped the fabric and how I've basically made the outer and inner, and I will be working on my machine, so you'll be able to see me sewing on my machine. And then the following time that's on, we'll be finishing off the bag. Yeah, so if you've got any more questions on PU, keep asking below and I will basically keep answering those for you. So I'm hoping these are helping you, all these Facebook Lives. And if you want anything teaching in the comments, well, I say anything teaching, it has to be bag related because I'm a bag queen. So yeah, so anything bag related will be really nice. And yeah, so happy Christmas. Thanks ever so much for buying my pattern. And I'll see you on the 30th. Bye.